Great. We are live now. So, hello everyone. Welcome back to yet another session from Cyber Preserve. And today we have a very interesting topic and a very interesting guest with us today. So, the topic for today that we are going to discuss is Darknet and machine learning. And for this particular topic, we have an expert from the domain. We have Levi with us today. So, Levi actually works as a lead security engineer at Macy's, and she's also a threat intelligence researcher working on machine learning projects for fun and for academia. They work in cybersecurity and utilize Python programming for automation and fun, including in the creation of spiders for Darknet research. They are also an active volunteer and ambassador for the Innocent Lives Foundation, a nonprofit focused on identifying predators online and turning them over to law enforcement for protection of children. So I would like to hand it over to Levi now. Hi, Levi. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are really excited for this talk. And
Hello.
Welcome to Cyber Preserve.
Thank you. I was very excited when you reached out. So I'm super excited to be here and to talk about this stuff. Anyone who knows me in general knows I don't shut up about this stuff. So it's going to be fun.
Yay.
I'm sorry, go on.
No, go ahead. It's all yours.
I am very much a annoying type of presenter in that I love back and forth. So I will probably be pausing to do that on occasion. It'd be great if I could read what buttons do on Zoom. Hang on. So we're going to share this. That's not what I wanted, actually. Hang on. Ah!
No worries. No worries. I'll just let the audience know that you can put the question in the live chat comment section, and we'll be happy to take the Q&A live as well after the session. And in between, as Levi proceeds and takes the session, if there is a pause, we can also take questions on that moment as well.
Absolutely. There we go. I did it right this time. You'd think I never present when I do it frequently. Whatever, it's fine. So you gave basically I was curious if you could see my screen because you almost verbatim read what I had here. So this is just my general introduction. If you want to hang out with me on professional websites like LinkedIn, you can find me by Cytissus Eurydice. Otherwise, most people know me as Levi Tannin or Levi. I do work in threat intelligence, focusing on cybersecurity threat intelligence. And I have been on the Darknet since I was 12 years old, and I just live there now. So I recently, in the past less than a decade, have gotten into machine learning. And I think the word avid may be an understatement, but I am definitely a volunteer and ambassador for the Innocent Lives Foundation. And these are the three topics I will never stop talking about. So if there are any questions on Darknet, machine learning, or the Innocent Lives Foundation, please let me know in the chat. I can't see the chat, but please interrupt me if there are questions. I am happy to answer them. So we're going to talk about the Darknet. You may get into this, we may get into this a little differently than you may see in other presentations, because when I talk about the Darknet, it's a little different than what people are talking about, generally speaking. But first, it's really important for us to understand what open source intelligence is, because this is going to play a role in our conversation going from what is on the Darknet, what can we use machine learning for on the Darknet. We need to understand open source intelligence. So this, if you've seen some of my other talks, you may have seen this. It's generally let's jump in at each word and see what's going on. So open generally means accessible. I can access it. I have a notebook and I can open it and read stuff. That page was empty. Oh, that page wasn't empty. Whatever. And then there's also the source. Where do you get it from? So if I open like this notebook and I'm looking at this because it's accessible, but where is the origin of all these notes coming from? It's not this notebook unless it's my own brain thoughts. It might be another book. Like I'm not going over there to get the actual book. Like maybe I have a Python course book and these are notes on Python. That is the origin, the source. And usually you'll find that there are sources within sources within sources. Somebody brought up to me earlier today, why is research called research? And that's part of what it is. You're constantly cycling through data. and looking up new information, which is awesome. And then finally, intelligence. What is intelligence? Depending on your scope, intelligence is going to be different things. In my day-to-day, I'm looking for actionable intelligence. And to get to that, you have to go through a lot of data that is not always actionable. It might just be whistleblowing. It might just be somebody shouting something to rile people up. And so you have to go from this headline of ransomware has attacked everybody to the intelligence, which is ransomware has actually attacked this one company and it's spreading or something. So that's what I mean when I'm talking about intelligence, but in a general sense, it's information and data that can be utilized. We're not going to go into the whole intelligence lifecycle today, though I will also talk about that endlessly. If anybody wants to hear me, never shut up. But in general, open source intelligence is accessible information from original sources. Basically anything posted, viewed, or interacted with by a user. Generally, this is publicly, and we'll get into the layers of the internet in a minute, but if it's posted publicly, regardless of the level of the internet, then that means that you can utilize it. It's hopefully something you don't have to necessarily interact with or use any significant interaction to gather. So you can get this on the internet, all levels, mass media, television, radio, print, specialized journals, conference materials, think tank, photos, geospatial information. A lot of stuff that I hear people digging into for OSINT is on the internet, which is great, but I always like to emphasize, do not limit it to that because there's so much out there. And then I also often get this question, is OSINT legal? Yes, generally, but depending on where you are, that might be different. I am not a legal representative and cannot tell you if it is legal where you are. Also depends on what you're doing. I can say that in the United States, according to the US public law, open source intelligence is produced from publicly available information, collected, analyzed, and disseminated in a timely manner to an appropriate audience. Think TikTok. Addresses a specific intelligence requirement, which again is some terminology we're not going to go into today, but is important. And some laws will vary state by state. So if you're in the States, check local laws. If you're outside of the States, check your also local laws and see what is allowed and not allowed. It's important. And then this is what I do. So I wanted to go into this because this is where my research lies, cyber threat intelligence. So the collection of an analysis of a threat actor's motives, targets, and attack behaviors. This is a subsection of cybersecurity. This is what my main focus is when I'm doing threat intelligence for work. And a lot of this is automatic or utilizes machine learning techniques to take implemented methodologies to analyze data. So this is kind of what I was talking about earlier with threat intel. You have a lot of data. You want to get to intelligence. You have one person for this example. If you have 10,000 sources in one person, and then you want intelligence, that is going to take a very long time. And more resources are going to pop up during that time period. So instead, you utilize some automation or machine learning tools in order to go from that data and get it to a actionable situation. You might only use that to go from data to information and then use human analysis to get to intelligence. It kind of depends on your methodologies. Let's see. There's three main areas of threat intelligence: dissemination, tactical, operational, and strategic. Again, not going to go into that too much today, but if there's ever any questions, you can reach out to me in the chat here or on wherever you find Levi Tannin hanging out, because that's usually me. And if you're looking for any companies that specialize in this, you've got Recorded Future, CrowdStrike, FireEye, Flashpoint, and even Suns. All right. Anyone who has seen any of my talks or talked to me for 5 minutes about Darknet knows that I hate the iceberg. I hate it. It drives me up a wall. I don't think it's a good representation of the internet at all. But it's an exaggerated simplicity. So this is what you'll usually see when you're looking up the layers of the internet. And I just always have to warn people, do not believe everything you see in infographics. So is gonna push this aside and just know that we're gonna talk about 3 levels, main high level levels of the internet. The Clearnet, sometimes called the surface web. I rarely hear it called the open web, but I guess the deep web, and then the dark net. Now, this is where we start getting to a point that people sometimes think they're the same thing. When I'm talking about the dark net, and we'll get into it a little bit more, the dark net encompasses dark webs. So when we get to that slide, you'll see there's a few different dark webs. I was going to ask a question here, but I think my friend has disappeared for a moment, which is fine. So I'm just going to, you're back.
Oh, I'm here.
Okay. So I know you had one other talk by a friend of mine on the darknet. So you might already have an answer to this, but I was curious on what you think the darknet is, or the dark web.
Basically, when I had very little or no knowledge, I used to think about it's something which is hidden, something which hidden in the sense like we don't know it exists, or hidden in the sense that maybe it's not accessible to me. Something which is somewhere it's like hidden, it's like a den, it's like a cave. And yeah. It seems like that. The term is like that. Something which is just
absolutely
below the access of the general public, and where some dark activities, exchange of information and whatnot is going on.
That's totally fair. That's a tamer response than I usually get to that question. So I'm appreciating that in general. I like that. So usually when I talk about the different layers of the internet, since we're still on this slide, I'm talking about, instead of using an iceberg, what I like to use is just the ocean in general. Because if you have ever seen a diagram of the ocean, you have the surface level, which is where people are swimming and sharks are hanging out. And then you have the deeper level, which is where you need scuba gear to get to generally, or you might even need a submarine, depending on how far you're going. You've got some interesting creatures down there, like giant whales and giant squids or krakens. And then you've got like the bottom of the ocean, which you absolutely need a submarine if you want to get to in general. And then all of these creatures look really weird and kind of scary, and they're strange manipulations of what you see elsewhere. Does that mean they're inherently more dangerous? Not necessarily. A lot of them are small and glowy, but it requires you to have specific access to a tool to get to them. And regardless of how deep the levels are, it's that kind of helps with understanding the different levels of the internet, in my opinion. So I prefer the ocean to an iceberg, but I don't have a slide for that because I don't know how to make infographics. It's not something I make. But this is just a quick little review of the levels. We've got the Clearnet, which basically, if it can be indexed by Google, Bing, or my personal favorite, that's really cool, DuckDuckGo, it's generally considered the Clearnet. What is the Clearnet website? If you want to go to the New York Times, that's the Clearnet. If you want to find a bank, their website is the Clearnet. A university, Facebook, its front page is the Clearnet. Same with Twitter. Actually, most of Twitter is the Clearnet. Then you've got the deep web. How do you interact with people online? This right now, we're on like a Zoom call, right? Can anybody access this Zoom call? No.
Until I share a link.
Yes, unless you share the link, the access. Now, do we need like a whole different networking structure to get there? No, but we are hidden behind a private link. So unless that link is shared out, no one else is going to get here. That is an example of the deep web, which is part of a lot of people just kind of forget things outside of websites when we get to this level, at least in my experience. So your bank account is the deep web. Your bank's website is the Clearnet. Your student registry, if you have to log into it, that is the deep web, but the school's website is the Clearnet. Discord is the deep web because you have to find servers to access. Not everything is just available, and you have to be logged in to interact or even see most of it. Steam, game accounts. If you're talking with friends in Steam or even just playing games with them, that is the deep web. DEF CON has a forum, also the deep web. Zoom calls, if they're not publicly available, they're considered part of the deep web. A lot of people play World of Warcraft or League of Legends and they're chatting inside. That's the deep web. Most things that you actually are interacting with, this is more of that social level. Those are the deep web. And it really encompasses a lot more than I think some people initially think, which is fun. And then we have my personal favorite, which is the Darknet, where I live every day. And basically you need specialized software and or knowledge to access these. On the screen, I have 3 symbols for 3 dark webs. So this is where I was talking earlier. I have a distinction. Freenet, which is this fun little leaping bunny friend. I2P, which I love this icon. I don't necessarily know exactly what it is, but I like it. And then Tor. Tor is the most recognized of the 3, right? You hear about Tor when the Silk Road was taken down. Every news article is about Tor. Everything bad in the world is happening on Tor. Grr. We forget that it was made by the military, technically the Navy, and that it does a lot of good. So mostly when we're talking about the darknet, we're talking about a layer, a networking structure rather, that is called the onion routing system, which is if you're typing it out, it's all capital TOR. It's where Tor gets its name from. Capital T, lowercase OR is the Tor project's browser and that infrastructure, that darknet. Tor, all capitals, is the baseline network structure for a lot of these dark webs on the darknet. I2P and Freenet both have different but similar structures to them. So you can't go to Tor and then hop, jokes implied by the logo, to Freenet with the bunny and then to I2P. They're different structures. But the foundational description and the designation of the network has a root, generally speaking, back to the original all capital Tor. I'm not going to talk too much on how these are structured right now. I have other talks that go into that, and I have a class that will at some point be back that goes into that a little bit more. But just know that when I say darknet, I'm talking about the encompassing dark webs, and 3 of them are Freenet, I2P, and Tor. Depending on the structure, I also consider IRCs and BSSs to be part of the dark web, darknet. Okay, there's a lot. I talked about a lot. I hope I didn't go too fast. Slow down YouTube. They have the option. I don't know if they do it live though.
Yeah, good.
I don't talk much, guys. If anybody from my job is here, they make fun of me all the time for just lurking and not talking. So I talk fast so I can stop talking faster. But threat intelligence, darknet, what is it? What are we doing? What are we talking about today? I don't know. How long does it take you to find a website? And I'll ask you, since you're the only one who can talk to me, on the Clearnet.
Hardly I don't think even a second. It's very simple. Yeah, it doesn't
maybe
take any time.
Might a little bit depend on your internet speed, but generally speaking, yeah, exactly. You go to Google and you're like, tell me what the Book of Faces is, and you'll get a link pretty fast, right?
Exactly, yes.
Now, let's say you log into Facebook, because that's our example. How long do you think it'll take you to find an old friend from school who you know the name of?
Again, it depends. Like if there are people with similar name and similar location and similar, let's say, background, school and college, then there would be a huge list. But when the name is unique, then I think it might take a minute. But if it's like a very common name, or if you just know the name, it might take maybe months, or you might even not find them. Sometimes you might even not find people because they might have a different name on Facebook and you're searching with a different name. You never know.
Good point. Yeah, absolutely. So you can see already there's a clear distinction between searching on the Clearnet to searching on the deep web, because once you log into Facebook, that you're now in the deep web. Now, could you search that person on Google and try that method also? Yes, that may be a little faster, but that depends on if their information is on the Clearnet. Now, let's say we know you have found Facebook, you've logged in, you found your friend, and they post about going on tour. And you want to find out what they're doing on tour, which if I had a Facebook, that's all I would post about. I don't have Facebook. So you go and you log into Tor and you're trying to find them. How long do you think it would take to find somebody doing stuff on Tor with no other information other than?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I have no idea what this.
And that's basically correct answer, right? First off, again, 100% depends. It's going to depend on what do you know. In this case, in this example, which I wish I could say is an exaggeration, but it's not. You have found someone on Facebook that mentions activities on Tor. I'll even give you a little bit more and say they indicate that they may be buying or selling illicit drug material, paraphernalia. And so you're like, okay, I want to go and find out what they're doing for whatever reason, no judging. And so I download Tor. And I go on and I find a chat room and I'm like, hey, have you seen my friend John Smith? And they're like, you're stupid, go away. So that didn't work. Now you're searching for John Smith. Are you really going to find John Smith? Well, now it depends. Did John Smith have any operational security? Is John Smith going by John Smith on Tor? If so, they were dumb. Don't do that. If so, you might be able to find them. If you know a username they use on other social media and they made the poor decision of using that on Tor, you might be able to find them and link them back to their personal accounts. But if they go by a completely different name and they go by a completely different alias, I was going to say something else, a completely different like username or handle, then what do you do? And there's a few methods at this point you can use, but it is going to take time, especially if you are doing this on your own by hand. And some of the issues with this is the structure. In this case, I've been kind and said they specifically said they were on Tor. But what if they were actually on Freenet, which is a completely different structure and way of interacting? What do you do then? Who knows, right? And I wanted to take a pause here and go back to say, you cannot expect that only bad things happen on Tor. Like I mentioned way in the beginning, I've been on Tor since I was 12 years old. How old am I now? I don't know. Doesn't matter. But I've been on this since I was 12. And I got on Tor because I was actively trying to find people who wanted to combat human trafficking and who were trying to assist people for human rights online. Now, Tor has a huge community of people who are actively trying to help those under regimes. That's the side of Tor I initially got into. So when I started hearing that Tor is this evil place, I was like, what's going on? You guys obviously aren't hanging out where I'm hanging out. And that's how I learned that it's really all perspective at every level, because you can say Facebook is the most evil place in the world, right? I have seen videos of people murdering people live. There's your red room on Facebook. I have seen people selling people on Craigslist, which is all Clearnet, right? It's all perspective. And the same goes with any other dark web. Right now, there are legal cases in the United States around Freenet, where people are being found with CSAM, which is child sexual abuse material, on their devices. Because how Freenet works is it will take an allocated part of your hardware to store its data. But it's not just your data from your browsing. It's also the data of the community. And that's how it uses the network structure. So you don't control all the stuff stored there. So if people are trading CSAM, what you may end up having is people who have nothing to do with that, but it's on their devices and law enforcement finds it. And now you have to prove, was this you or was this just the internet structure? And that's where you can run into a lot of problems. And there's at least 3 legal cases going on right now in the States. I got off on a tangent. I'm going to get back on top. So some people, when they're trying to find intelligence on Tor, they'll start with Google and be like, give me Tor sites or give me onion sites, because Tor's ending URLs all end in .onion. And then you find all these things, people being like, these are some onion sites, go to these. So you pick one. My personal favorite on that page is the best darknet websites you don't find on Google, because I found it on Google. And I like that. I think that's funny. And so then you can find some websites. Is it legitimate? Probably, because a lot of them are going to send you to hubs that all have the same exact data. And they're just like the very surface of Tor in this case. So like the hidden wiki. A lot of people go there. It's not my preferred wiki, but it's a good one. You can go to hidden answers. You can go try to find out all this stuff. And you can see by looking at hidden answers, this little screen grab shows you that some of these questions are not malicious at all, like you would normally see online. One of the questions is, anyone else get excited about getting badges? What does that mean? What's a badge? Are Girl Scout badges, Boy Scout badges? I get badges when I participate in Trace Labs events, CTFs, when some certifications give you a little badge to put on your email. So do you guys get excited about those? I might. Some of them are cool. If you take my classes, you got a badge, and that was pretty cool. And then what about why would my girlfriend over a year say we're not friends? What's going on? This person just wants some help. Not really malicious so far. Now, if we can dig in and they did something bad, that's different, right? And then helping people get over trauma. There's a big community on Tor that's talking about trauma. And so is that inherently bad? I don't think so. I do want to underline here that you'll see there's a difference between onion URLs in these two screen grabs at the bottom. One is pretty short. One is really long. The long one is a V3. That's the new URL. So anybody who's listening who does go on Tor, in case you just haven't heard, if you have sites you like, you better get the V3 because V2 is out of here. Just keep that in mind. It's been moving out for a while, but it's finally getting out of here. So we have some URLs. What do we do now? Well, we download Tor. Where do you download Tor? You go to the torproject.org. You download it from them. They give you a hash for it. Verify the hash, because if you download it from somewhere else, it could be like broken. Somebody could have done something, added something to it. You want it from the Tor project. What do we do next? Well, we have the URL, so let's go to the URL. And then look, they're telling you right there, V3, please take it. And then we visit that and we start looking for other things at this level. So we're at the hidden wiki in this example, and we're saying, hey, they have social networks. We've got Torbook, we've got Facebook, which don't even get me started because I don't understand why that's on Tor based on the terms of service. You have Connect, you've got Galaxy 3, which is pretty fun. Then you have like the Hack Freak, Anarchy, Where's Virus Crack, the place people expect to see, though that's not necessarily anything malicious there. And then you've got like introduction points, where you want to go hang out. Here are some places that claim to be search engines and not the best, but let's try to see if we can find something on that. So we're going to go to Not Evil, which is one of the search engines on Tor. And you're going to look up, let's say, hacker, because we just want to find that. And in this case, I tried to grab the ones that are okay, including the Central Intelligence Agency, or the CIA for the United States, who do have a Tor site, which is fun. It's actually CIA.gov, and then all of the Tor address, which always makes me laugh. Sorry, hang on. I'm not kidding when I say I don't talk too much. My throat gets sore very fast. What you tend to have a lot during these search engine hunts is pornography, unfortunately. So be careful if you're going to use this. And then this is very important, is it's volatile. And that's part of what makes it so hard to properly index, is these sites come and go, and they change their URLs, and they're all over the place. So how are we going to find any viable intelligence if we can't even find the website, let alone if the website is down during our time period for intelligence? What are we going to do? That is where I just explained all this. That's where we get into the tools like iMake, and that we're going to talk about today. And if you're arachnophobic, I'm kind of sorry, but he's really cute. So what's a spider? In this case, they're not insects, they're arachnids, and they're real cute like this little guy, and they're very helpful. But that's not what we're talking about. We're going to talk about online spiders. An online spider is often known as a crawler or a robot, though there's slight differences. This is like the backbone of Google. This is how you go about being part of a search engine. They're automated scripts or programs that move throughout the internet they don't have to be directed. In some cases, they can just be let loose. But if you want to actually gather relevant data and not just general data, then you're going to want to have a directed spider. Now, how do you do that? We'll get to that in a second. These create, so there are different ways of utilizing these tools. You can have it so that a spider or a crawler is going and making a copy of the website for you to review later, so it can't change. Or maybe they're just pulling specific data, and that's even more directed than in general. So it kind of depends what you want it to do, but generally speaking, they're good for benign tasks and for finding negative or malicious information that you target it towards, like just scraping for email addresses, for example. And now we're getting closer to the machine learning part. We spent a lot of time in the darknet. Now we're moving a little bit. This is not machine learning yet. Right now, we're just in programming, but these are the tools I utilize and create, some of which at a low level, I have samples up online. There are different types of spiders. There's a centralized, which is a small scale spider, usually on one host that's just acting from there and going out. There are parallel or distributed ones where you have two hosts, whether they're near each other or not, and the spider is going out from those points and somehow, hopefully, communicating so there isn't as much overlap. Then you have a hybrid where you might have the initial component being a single host where data might be stored elsewhere. Generally speaking, you end up with a centralized bottleneck here. There's peer-to-peer, which is usually lightweight and emphasizes the crawling at a very large scale. So maybe myself and somebody on the other side of the world are both doing it. So our starting points are at different parts of the internet. Because if you go to another place, and you go and Google restaurants near me, for example, you're going to get a lot of different hits initially. So you're starting separate areas. Then there's cloud-based, which tends to be the most cost-effective if you are doing a large-scale project. Amazon has some hosted services you can do this on, or you can at least host your server on the cloud so that if you have like a power outage, it doesn't kill your spider. These are generally set up as like data as a service concepts. We got there. We did it. We've made it. We're talking about machine learning and artificial intelligence. All right. Now, the reason I have this slide is I had a conversation not even 2 days ago where somebody was conflating artificial intelligence and machine learning. And it is a common mistake because they are not the same thing. Are they similar? Yes. Are they connected? Yes. This is where my handy dandy notebook comes back in. I have definitions on the screen, but this is the definition that I like the most, and it's not on the screen because I forgot about it until right beforehand. Basically speaking, you have artificial intelligence, which is any technique which enables computers to mimic human behavior. It's a tighter definition, but artificial intelligence tends to be defined pretty broadly. Subsequent to that is machine learning. This is basically the foundational blocks that you build upon to get to artificial intelligence. This is the ability to learn without explicitly being programmed to do a task. So if we have a methodology where we are telling it to find all of the aspects of a language, which we'll talk about in a minute, if anybody was wondering what I was talking about Madlibs, then you aren't telling it the word A is this part of language. The word no is this part. It's something that it is able to train on and then analyze itself. We're not going to talk about deep learning today, but that is also part of this. So we are talking about machine learning, not artificial intelligence, just so we're all on the same page. All right, so machine learning is not artificial intelligence, so it should be easier, right? No, There's a lot of different types of machine learning. You've got different kinds of methodologies, baseline methodologies. There are more than just this by a lot. Because this doesn't talk about natural language processing or anything like that, but that's getting a little bit more technical within these higher levels. So you've got learning problems, supervised learning, unsupervised learning, reinforcement learning. This is different ways of dealing with the data. Reinforcement learning is starting to get into that realm of how humans learn and then teaching a machine to do that. You've got, which is really interesting, please look it up. You've got hybrid learning, which is semi-supervised. I have worked a lot with that one. You've got self-supervised, multi-instance. Then we're getting into inductive and deductive, which is fun because that's a lot of how we do like science in human worlds. And transductive, we've got learning techniques, multitask, active, online, transfer, ensemble. There's a lot of different types of machine learning. We're not going to dig too deeply into any of them right now because it's supposed to be kind of high level, but it's important to know that machine learning is not a one size fits all. If there's a certain area you're interested in, you go for it. Like I primarily work with natural language processing, and my current favorite form of machine learning is GAINS, which I cannot remember what the A stands for right now. But basically it's creating something to mimic what is real. I did this when I made a captcha breaker, which you can see on my GitHub. And I'm trying to get it to work for making new Pokemon, but that one's breaking my computer a little bit. So, and then this is really important. And if you ever have a conversation with me about machine learning, you will hear me talk about this. So I felt I needed to put it in here. What do we want to do with data? Do we want to fit in? And the answer is kind of. Because you don't want to be a mimic, which is overfitting, which is so complex to the point that you're getting like a 95 plus accuracy when you are training your data, which is not good. Because when you're working in machine learning, sorry, you're working between training and my brain just stopped. You're training your data versus having it actually do a task. So if you have, let's say 100 samples and we want to train the data on 25 of those samples to see if it can understand the trend for whatever we're looking for, then if you're overfitting, and if you look at this image that's all the way to the right, it's going to hit as many data points as it can while it's going through. And that means that you're going to have a high correction rate, which is not great, because for those 25, sure, you've got like a 98%. That's great. But when you introduce those 75 other points, you might be missing actual valid data that you need to act on because you overfit it to that 25. And in the same vein of being bad would be underfitting, where you don't want to get too close. So you make it a lot less complex and it's unable to actually learn the data. So instead of, and you'll see that all the way to the left here, instead of actually following the trend, it's just kind of cutting through. And that's never good either, because then you're not going to get any score. You're going to end up with like a 15 when you should have like an 80. So you want optimal fitting, which is it's following the trend, but it's not 100%. You're going to miss some stuff, and that's understandable. Humans miss stuff too. And so we can't always expect machines to be better. And so I have fun stuff to look at, but that's not the important part. Now we're going to talk about fun things. Hang on, I have to escape PowerPoint. PowerPoint always likes to take over the world. Ta-da, I'm back.
This is so cool. This is so cool.
This is free on my LinkedIn. No, I'm a liar. It's on my GitHub. It's under my Madlib Workshop. Anybody can play with what I'm about to show you guys. But this is a real life example of how to use machine learning that is it does not appear like it has anything to do with my work on the darknet, but that is wrong. It's a good foundation to that. This is also my piggy. It's a Rickroll. You've all been Rickrolled. Congratulations. Basically speaking, this Madlib workshop is utilizing both a spider that is already built in. So if you want to learn how to work with spiders, this is a spider right here. There are ways to have a spider made with like Scrappy, which I know my friend who you had on previously, he used Scrappy a lot last. I was talking to him. I don't use Scrappy when I'm doing targeted searches. So this is more by hand, but it is using Beautiful Soup. So it utilizes a spider, and then it also utilizes natural language processing in order to do a machine learning review of the website you have it go and scrape. And it is supplemented with this really quick introduction to natural language processing. And what natural language processing is, it is a way to analyze language. Specifically in this case, we're talking about English. It utilizes, at least this does, utilize the natural language toolkit, which is already built into most of, well, it's not built in, but it is a Python library you can install. For people who may be like, what am I looking at right now? And why am I looking at it? This is Google Colab. If you have a Gmail account, which most people do at this point, you have access to this for free. You just go to colab.research.google.com or just look up Google Colab. And this is a fantastic place for data scientists and machine learning friends. And basically what it is it's a Jupyter Notebooks environment. Now you can download Jupyter Notebook locally. You can use Anaconda, which is what I like to use in order to have a Jupyter Notebook environment locally. But Google Colab lets you work with other people, share links pretty easily, and easily download links from GitHub. So highly recommend utilizing this, especially while you're playing around. The reason Jupyter Notebook is so good is all I have to do is double click this and look at that. This is what you were seeing. This is the back end. What it's doing is letting you have a notebook that you can work out of in order to keep your notes with your code. And when it comes to machine learning and you have to explain what the heck you're doing, having a whole bunch of code blocks is not always great. You'll see I have that here just because I'm explaining all of the code in depth. But most of my work doesn't have those in-depth code blocks because I'm not writing it for someone else where I am for this. So utilizing something like a Jupyter Notebook environment is really great. Because like I said, I use this all the time for my own notes when I was learning how to do machine learning, and I still use it when I'm working on new projects. So like I mentioned, this is free for anybody to access via my GitHub, and I'll put this in our chat actually. So if you want to put this in the Google chat, if I can find, there it is, I found it. Zoop. And so this way you can play around with it. And for the natural language processing one, it goes over the different aspects of that Python library so that you can figure out how it's working with each and every single type of part of the grammar rules of English, at least in this case. And then go do that one first if you're going to go through it, and then come back and do the Madlib workshop, which goes over a few things again, shows you how to use Jupyter Notebooks in this instance. There is a spider, so you get to see where the spider is. And then we've got what is a natural language processing, kind of another little tidbit into it so that we can utilize that. And you'll see at the end that here's one called the Monkey King. This is a Madlib, and you can see that it's asking for an adjective, adverb, noun, and verb. Using natural language processing and your spider, you will identify a website for the spider to pull from. It will then take all of that text and put it into a natural language processing methodology, pull out those words and send them as needed to each Madlib. You'll choose which Madlib you want, and it will fill it in for you. And every time you do this, the likelihood is that you're going to end up with new words from whatever website you choose. You can do this. When I was testing, I did this live initially on Twitch, and everybody was like, you have to go to the Matrix Wiki and use the Matrix Wiki. So I did, and we got different words every single time. I also found the Pirates of the Caribbean script. We use that too. It's a lot of fun. And then you'll have ones like this one's about Disney. So I pre-filled in some stuff, but otherwise, again, it's going to use natural language processing. And for those who want to learn how this works hands-on, I left a bunch of them empty in the notebook so that you can actually get the code to work properly. So that, I'm not going to play it right now just because we are at 15 minutes and I want to do Q&As. So that is my Madlib project for everybody to do, and your intro to machine learning and the fun that is Darknet.
Thank you so much. I think this is so wonderful. I do have a question from the Q&A, and I personally also have a question on this.
Sure.
So I think first I'll go with the Q&A question. So there's a question that if somebody is very new to Darknet, how we can check our activities or data that is already compromised.
So you don't have to go on the Darknet to do that. Usually leaks actually end up on the Clearnet or the deep web. Ours is some of that on the Darknet. Yes, of course it is. Do you want to go there on the Darknet and find it? Probably not, unless you're used to being on the Darknet and you have good OPSEC. There are free services like Have I Been Pwned that in some cases can tell you this. A lot of credit card companies will provide this if they get an alert, and they'll let you know. Generally speaking, I live by the rule that it's not when you're going to get hacked, it's when you already were, because most people have in some capacity been part of a leak, whether they know it or not. The best way to combat that is to have a good password management process, which should include having like a password manager and not reusing the same password, which is why I emphasize password managers, because then you don't have to worry about remembering the password or having a weak password. You can just have it handle all of them and generate it for you. And you want to just do your research on that. Otherwise, Have I Been Pwned? You can sign up for free in general. And you should look into any sensitive PII information, how the organizations handling that, handle it. Like your financial information from your bank or credit card company, medical information, whatever, hospital. Unfortunately, I will admit, hospitals have some of the worst cybersecurity. I initially was working in pharmaceuticals because I wanted to work with the healthcare industry because it depressed me how bad they were at cybersecurity. So I would always keep an eye on that. And avoid posting about personal information. You don't want to give your PII out, your personal identifiable information. So where you can avoid that, utilize good password structures and processes and enable multi-factor authentication. So if your password gets out there, for some reason, let's say you have a 36-character password, unlikely to get cracked. All right, great. But somehow Facebook gets hacked and your password gets out there anyway. Well, I don't know if Facebook does this, but in some cases, you can enable multi-factor authentication, and any chance you can, you should, because that means that even if your password gets out there, they still have a hard time getting into your account without being able to access, the multi-factor. So that is my answer to how to avoid it. How to find it is generally talking with the companies that control that data, and and following Have I Been Pwned. I'm not going to recommend anybody in general go to the forums and websites on the clear or the deep web that have this information, because it's not safe.
That's true. I think I have a follow-up question on this. Actually, it was my question, but the viewer has also brought that question.
Cool.
That if we find anything on those sites, any leakage of our data, or let's say if we find any PII information there, how to report? What are the next steps? Like, let's say you are on Darknet for a good reason, like we saw, and suddenly while you were there, you incidentally found some information which was PII. If it's not yours, let's say if it's not yours, it's someone else, and it's a list of information, then what are the next steps?
Generally speaking, I don't recommend you reach out to the person because that's suspicious. But what I do recommend is contacting authorities where possible, taking screenshots. For the love of all things on the internet, please take screenshots. There's a joke that there are bots that will tell you that I say to take screenshots because I say this all the time. The darknet, all of them, is volatile. You could find some fantastic information, and then in 20 minutes, that whole site is down. And you don't know when it's coming back. So if you find something, you need to take a screen grab. Or if you're using something like my spiders, they pull all the text and we store it so we can analyze it. So you want a screen grab and you want the URL so that you can package those and turn it over to law enforcement. So like the FBI sometimes will take these cases. And then if you know that this comes from a specific bank, you want to let that bank know. If you know it comes from a specific like social media, you want to let them know. A lot of them tend to have, they're not bug bounties, but if you can report it, you can let people know and they should take actions. I don't know all of the legality behind this, but if they don't take actions for a long enough period of time, I think it's like 90 plus days, sometimes you can report it publicly so that it gets, at least people start knowing about it. You have to research that. Again, I am not legal counsel, but generally speaking, there is a time range where you can start talking about it publicly. If at that point you do, you have to take out all the PII because then you're just as bad as the people who got that information to sell it or whatever they're doing with it. Otherwise,
that makes sense. Like, I really appreciate that one point, like preserve the evidence. Like, as you said, it's like you never know when it will be down and when it will be coming back, and you just saw it, you know it, but you don't have the evidence now. So I think that's a great point. We have a next question. How to just begin mixing cybersecurity and AI or ML? Like, how to just begin mixing? If you want to answer that.
Hang on a second. I have an example.
Great.
What you're looking at is my GitHub. Everyone can go to it. It's not private. So you'll see public on all these things. I probably have some private ones, but that doesn't matter. Where is it? AI and cybersecurity.
I got to say you're a powerhouse.
I love sharing information. I hate gatekeeping. So if you have a question, I have an answer, I'm going to answer you. And if I don't, I'm going to find the answer.
Love
so now, do you want to jump into this? No. You want to have a good foundation before you jump into any of this stuff, right? I would not jump directly into cybersecurity and AI without having a foundation in 1, Python scripting, 2, a theoretical understanding of AI and machine learning, and 3, Jupyter notebooks, because it's going to save your life. But beyond that, go for it. I have a repo called AI in Cybersecurity, which I believe answers this exact question. And basically, it'll just show you how to do some tests for this. Like this one is going over, no, this is not labeled imported data, that is talking about URL length, domain registration length, web page traffic, all of this stuff. And then there's math. And nobody likes that. I like it, but nobody else likes it. So you do want to understand the math behind it, which is usually the actual gatekeep to this stuff. But that doesn't mean you can't have fun with it. And here's a great example of the overfitting I was talking about. If I'm classifying samples, this right now, you'll see here that I have an accuracy of 43%. That's not great. Here's one of 88%. I think somewhere in here I had tested, it might be a different one. Here's an accuracy of 90. Now I'm getting a little suspicious. I had at some point an accuracy, I think, of like 96. And that's really sus. And I don't trust that because it seems like we're getting too overfit.
Yeah.
This is not an industry standard, but a general good rule for me is that if it's 95 or above, I'm looking at it like,
Exactly. So, I get your point. Like it becomes like, it starts to get too much accuracy.
Yeah.
Then it becomes suspicious. Like, am I having some biasing in the data or something is wrong? Because then it's going towards the other side, like more accuracy side. So yeah, that's true. One thing which I saw that you were referencing, the math part, because that is feature extraction, right? How to extract features for your data sets, right?
Yep.
Great. That makes sense because I think a lot of people they don't know about this, like how feature sets work, and like feature extraction is a major part of machine learning.
Absolutely.
Whether we are working with supervised, unsupervised, hybrid, anything, feature extraction is the major part. So
Yeah. I would recommend, instead of going to my AI and cybersecurity, which there's great stuff in there that's about malware detection, phishing detection, all that stuff that we want to find. And that a lot of people in cybersecurity are looking for, or looking to see how good it is so that they can do it if they're like a pen test or they're running simulations. Start with machine learning and analysis, which is also in my repo if you want to look at it. And this one is going to be great because it's going to show you where to get the resources to learn from. So like this one has, there's a place called kaggle.com that has a lot of data science sets for this kind of stuff. This is the Titanic one. And now you can see what the data looks like. Here's the CSV version, how we're going to pull out specific stuff about age. So right here, we're talking about the medians, the mins, the max. How are we working with NumPy, and pandas, which are Python libraries specifically for these tasks. And then let's get a grouping and then the mean of that group. So 27.9% of these passengers were female, 30.7% were male. Okay. And then we can go in and we can start showing that data, which is, you always want to show rather than tell because it makes more sense. And that's just week one. There's multiple weeks to this. There's some stuff I still have to put in here, I'll be honest with you. But it's a good introduction. There's a lot of resources online. I personally like books. I have a small library at my house, but if you prefer just to have everything online, I'm throwing Jupyter notebooks at you. I'm begging you. And then, sorry, go on.
Yeah, no, I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that, because you not only shared the context, you actually shared a lot of resources and showed how people can access it via your GitHub. So that's amazing. That's really amazing. We have another question, like,
Yes.
Aside from getting around censorship or wanting more privacy, what's a really good use for the dark web for regular online users?
Don't go on YouTube.
So, we are on YouTube.
I know.
What are you saying?
I'm saying don't go on YouTube on tour. Can you? Yes. Do you want to? I mean, okay. It is a lot better in my lifetime, which the Darknet and I are not that much separated in age. It's not fast, so you don't want to use it for like general purpose, like video streaming is what I was kind of getting at. Can you? Yes. Is it going to buffer the best? Probably not, though it is a lot better than it used to be. People who remember the original dial-up, that was Tor even beyond the original dial-up. Like it just hung out there. And that's part of the point a little bit, because that's just how it's structured. It is smaller than the rest of the internet, and the foundation of it is mostly peer-to-peer. Now, you can use it for general browsing. Otherwise, you want to find stuff without it getting connected necessarily to you, then go for it. You want to just generally browse, generally search for things. You can access the Clearnet and the deep web via Tor. You cannot access Tor via the Clearnet and the deep web. It's not a two-way street.
Makes sense.
Now, it's a lot of darknets, Tor, Freenet, I2P, others included, are blocked on the Clear and the deep web because they're suspicious, or they have really hard captchas, which on my screen, I just break those with the machine learning. But generally, otherwise, you'll just have to deal with that a lot. But it's a lot of privacy, being anonymous, just being able, if you have good OPSEC, to do things without constantly getting messages or advertisements. So if you're like looking up the Darknet, you'll suddenly see on your YouTube account, if you use Google, all of the Darknet stuff, or you'll start getting advertisements for VPNs and other things. And that's a lot of what people want to avoid. It's more of just avoiding being watched. Now, a lot of what are they called? Reporters use Tor for privacy purposes. There are social media on Tor. There are actual links for like Facebook on Tor, which again, I don't understand how they justify that with their terms of service, but it's okay. But then there are Tor-based social medias. Dread is my favorite, and I will always love Dread, which is basically the Darknet version of Reddit. So basically the answer is anything you want to, but I don't recommend going streaming because it's going to be painful.
Got it. We have like one last question, and then we are going to wrap up because we are just close to the time.
Sorry.
So how often do you come across bot detection on darknet sites?
Bot detection? Yeah. I just want to make sure. So there's a lot of sites actually that are fighting against doing that, which is part of the reason that there isn't really a good social media. Dread's a great one. The bigger the community is, the more they're trying to avoid being indexed. And so you'll see that in a lot of, let me take a step back here. There's the Clearnet and the deep web on the open web, which is kind of more what I call it. And then in the darknet, you have dark webs, and within dark webs, there's a clear version and a deep version also. And yeah, that's why I was like, we're only talking high levels. Now we're getting into the weeds a little bit. When you get into that stuff, a lot of the bigger communities are trying to protect themselves from indexing and from being analyzed via these bots. Usually what you get into at this point is you need to use some kind of deep learning, which is another, like I mentioned earlier, is part of this whole AI machine learning life that we weren't going to talk about too much today, but you pulled it out of me, which can interact with those websites like a person, create an account, access it, and all that stuff in order to fool their security procedures. Then you'll run into like the best of the best, like chef kiss captchas I've ever seen in my life are on Tor. They're fantastic. I just talked with a company I was on a stream with a few weeks ago where they're starting to use a new kind of captcha. And I immediately started laughing during my meeting with them because I was like, that has been on Tor for months or weeks. My wolf has appeared. Hello. For months or years. And it's so funny when I start seeing this stuff moving into the Clearnet space, because clearly somebody in like InfoSec was on Tor and they were like, I love this. Let's use this at our company. I've kind of spread out here, but the answer is it's in a lot of places. The bigger the community and the further into the dark nets you get in the dark webs, the more likely you're going to have anti-indexing procedures, which is those anti-bots. And then you just have to make them smarter. That's why I jumped from having like a random bot going around to machine learning, because then I'm already starting with that smarter context.
Makes sense. I think that's a very, very good answer. I think I learned a lot through these questions today. So that's amazing. One last thing that I would like to hear from you before we wrap up the session is, how do you think, because today I got to know about I got to know about Darknet, but from a very different perspective, in fact, from a positive perspective as well. So what are your thoughts on how Darknet would be useful for the future of cybersecurity, good future of cybersecurity?
I asked a similar question not too long ago. So the foundation of the Tor network, Tor all caps, I think is great for security purposes. I think what the Darknet is teaching people in a positive light is the importance of privacy and also personal responsibility. People tend to get really aggravated with people who are anonymous bullies online. And what I find on Tor is there is some level of gatekeeping for those people who initially join up. And there's a little bit of not so much maybe like bullying or pushing back because they're anonymous. But the deeper you get into it, and the more you interact with these people, the more you're seeing people just acting on things they really like. Like there's chat rooms that I don't necessarily recommend going to because it can be dangerous, but there are chat rooms where I used to just sit on a chat roulette on Tor and talk about Yu-Gi-Oh cards because I wanted to see what people would do. And I've hung out with a bunch of cool people just talking about Yu-Gi-Oh cards. And that means nothing because I don't know who they are and they don't know who I am. Whereas you go into a chat room on the Clearnet and somebody really wants to track you down, if you don't have proper OPSEC, that is not impossible to do.
Yeah.
So I think they're great tools for pushing why you should have OPSEC, why we want multi-factor authentication, password management, all of these great things we want in cybersecurity. I think the darknet, any of the dark webs you go onto, are almost like living, breathing examples of what we actually want in a security field. And the structure of it is very helpful to protecting yourself if you're doing it correctly, which again always leads to that education piece. So I think it's a good example. Hopefully
Yeah. Thank you so much. I really appreciate not only how you shared like how darknet can be useful, but one of the major things which I feel is like you created a lot of awareness around what darknet actually is. I know in our previous sessions, like in one of our previous sessions, we had our mind was like, oh my God, it has just opened about darknet. And today we got to dive into different perspectives, machine learning and whatnot. So I really appreciate that, because I think people in cyber or outside cyber, definitely if they know certain percentage of it, I think that would create a great awareness among general public around darknet and what it is. So thank you so much, and especially for people who want to like pursue learning in this area, and especially integrating darknet with machine learning. So I think this is the right session for them, and I really appreciate like how you shared all the resources with the audience, and how now it can be 100% resourceful for them, because they didn't know. I didn't know actually. So thank you so much for joining us today. And everyone who joined us live, thank you so much for all your questions. They were like really amazing, insightful questions that we had today. And they actually give an edge to the session today. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yes.
And we'll again meet for yet another session with yet another speaker. But we are going to get you back again. I don't know when, but I would love to have you again with us.
I'm always happy to come back to this kind of stuff. So by all means, let me know. And if anyone does have more questions that we didn't have time for, you can find me, Levi Tannin, on Twitter. I'm always answering questions.
Thank you so much. Have a great weekend, everyone. Bye-bye.